Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today, I decided to do something a little bit different, so I'm going to paint a Space Marine using a random colour generator to decide all of the colours. First of all, let's have a quick look at the rules. I'm going to use the random colour generator for each base colour, and I'm going to use the closest paint I have to whatever comes up. If nothing's close or a match, mixing paint is allowed. The random generator is only for base coats. Shades are going to be applied with whatever works best. Highlights are going to be a brighter version of the base colour. Metallics can be painted with lead belcher. And the reason why I'm doing this experiment is to see if the end results will be any good. See if people worry too much about colour theory and matching their colours. Possibly come up with a new Space Marine chapter. And most importantly, to have fun. So to start this off, I've primed the model white. This will give us a nice bright base colour for whatever first colour comes up. If I'd started off with black, it's a possibility that some of the colours may not work. So now it's time to spin the wheel. See what colour I'm going to get to paint the armour. So I've come up with light orange for the power armour. So for this I'm going to use Troll Slayer orange. It's a nice light orange paint. I'm going to apply this all over the power armour to the Space Marine. So this is obviously going to take a couple of layers to build up to a solid cover. I'm really glad that I primed with white, because doing light orange over black would take so many layers. So I'm just going to work in a few thin coats, cover most of the model with some of this Troll Slayer orange. Not worrying about being too neat at this stage. If I get this over other areas, it's okay. I'll be painting over it with different colours, and not a lot's going to be any brighter than Troll Slayer orange. So just going to take my time, work my way around the model, and in a few smooth, even coats, I'm going to build up to a solid layer of Troll Slayer orange all over the power armour to the Space Marine. So I'm making sure I work this into all of those recesses and crevices of the power armour. I don't want any of the white showing. I want to ensure I get a nice solid base coat of Troll Slayer orange all over the power armour to the Space Marine. After several layers, I've built up to a nice solid bright orange colour all over the Space Marine. So the next thing is I'm going to paint the Aquila, the trim on the shoulder pads, and one of the knee pads. It's time to spin that colour wheel again, see what I come up with this time. Indigo. Don't think there's a Games Workshop paint that is that indigo colour, so I'm going to mix a little bit of Gene Stealer purple with some Altdorf blue. This will give us that purpley blue look of indigo, keeping it nice and bright so it matches with that orange power armour we've got. I'm just going to carefully apply this all over the Aquila first. It's going to take a couple of layers to get solid coverage. Just being nice and neat, really careful around the orange. I don't want to get this over there and have to try and paint back over. I'm also going to pick out the outer trim here to the shoulder pads to tie the model together. I'm going to catch these with some indigo as well. And I'm also going to paint the right knee pad with indigo as well. Some chapters use this to put chapter markings and company markings and things on, so I might as well pick this out with indigo. And it'll also break up that orange power armour, add a bit more interest to the model. So I'm just going to make sure I catch all of these areas with a couple of layers of this mix. After a few layers, you can see I've built up to a solid colour all over these areas. It's looking really nice, actually works quite well together. So it's time to spin the wheel again, see what I'm going to paint the undersuit. honeydew greens. This is a greeny yellowy colour. So for the honeydew, I'm going to use this Skarsnik green. Sort of a yellowy greeny colour. I'm just going to apply this all over the undersuit to the Space Marine. So obviously being really careful once again around all the areas of power armour. Don't want to get any of this over that orange we've already applied. I really don't fancy painting over that if I can help it. I'm going to pick out all of the ridged parts to the undersuit, his legs and his arms, and all the bits around the torso with a couple of layers of Skarsnik green to build up to a nice solid colour all over these undersuit areas. After a couple of layers, you can see I've got a nice solid bright honeydew green colour all over that power armour. So the next thing I'm going to paint will be all the straps and the belt. Spin that colour wheel again, see what colour I come up with for straps and belts. Now I've got dark green. So for the good dark green colour, I'm going to come in with Caliban green. I'm going to start off by painting the belt. So being really careful around all the other colours. This is a much darker paint, it's going to be really hard to paint over. I'm going to make sure I catch all of the belt with a couple of layers of Caliban green. I'm also going to make sure I pick out the sort of straps on his back, as well as any of the cables on the model. So I'm just going to look around, see if there's any little bits of cabling or anything like that. I'm going to pick these out with some Caliban green as well. So he's got these ones here on his helmet. Some of the models have got them on their legs and their arms as well. All of the straps and the belt painted. The next thing I'm going to paint is going to be the pouches hanging from his waist and the gun holster. So I'm going to spin the wheel again and see what colour these are going to be. We've got red. So for a nice red colour, I'm going to use Mephiston red. It's a nice mid-tone red. Should work really well with the rest of the colours we've applied. So I'm just going to pick out his gun holster and the pouch hanging off of his waist. Trying not to get any of this over the other areas we've already painted. I'm going to make sure I pick out these pouches with a couple of layers of Mephiston red. And with the pouches picked out, there's only a couple of details left to paint on the model now. The next one of those is going to be the casing to the bolt gun. So I'm going to spin the wheel again, see what colour I come up with for the bolt gun. And we've got yellow. So we have a nice bright yellow bolt gun on this Space Marine. So for this I'm going to use Avalanche Sunset. I'm just going to paint all of the casing to the bolt gun with a couple of layers of Avalanche Sunset. Just take a couple of layers to build up to a solid cover. I'm just going to ensure I get a nice smooth layer of Avalanche Sunset all over that bolt gun. Bit of a change from the normal black or classic red bolt guns that I normally paint. I don't see why a Space Marine couldn't have a yellow bolt gun. Going to make this model look really unique. These random colour combinations. With that bolt gun painted, there's only one last base colour left to apply, and that's going to be to paint all of the metallics on the model. So for the metallics, as I said in the rules, I'm going to come in with Lead Belcher. Just going to paint all of the metallic details on the Space Marine, so all the bits on the bolt gun. And this model here is holding the magazine as well, so I'm going to make sure I pick out all of that. Just going to catch all of these with a couple of layers of Lead Belcher. So as this model comes together, I'll start applying some highlights. Let me know in the comments down below what you think this random chapter of Space Marines would be called. Let's see if we can get some interesting names for these orange Space Marines. Just picking out all those metallic details on the backpack. So you see I'm getting those vents, just getting these with a couple of layers of lead belcher. With that lead belcher applied, those all of the base coats are painted on the model. So now the next step is going to be to apply some shades. First shade I'm coming in with is Fugan Orange. I'm going to use this as a pin shade all over the power armour. So I'm coming in with a really small brush. For this, I'm just applying a little bit of this shade paint into all of the recesses on the power armour. It probably isn't going to be the darkest shade that I've ever applied to a Space Marine, but it should add a little bit of definition into all of these recesses to the Space Marine. If you're doing this, be really careful. Make sure you just get these into the recesses. If you do overspill a little bit, you can tidy back up with a bit of Troll Slayer Orange. I'm just making sure I put a little bit of this shade into all of the recesses. So this is one of the steps that takes the longest when painting Space Marines. It really is an important step. It really adds definition all over that power armour. Makes all of the details on the model stand out. So just make sure you apply a little bit of this shade as a pin shade to all of the recesses on the Space Marine. And now with some Drakenhof Nightshade, I'm going to use this to shade the Aquila. This will darken down that purpley indigo colour a little bit. I'm just going to shade this all over the Aquila on his chest. With some Athonian camo shade. I'm going to use this to shade all over the undersuit. Once again, it will go into those recesses, add a nice dark green colour all over that much brighter honeydew green we used, because you've been really careful around the power armour. Don't want to create dark lines on the edges of that orange. And finally, with some Nuln Oil, just going to shade anything that we didn't shade before. So it's going to be all of the metallics, the red to the pouches, as well as I'm going to apply this all over the bolt gun. So it will sink into all of those recesses, add some definition, give the impression of a dirty, grimy bolt gun as well. I'm just going to catch all of these areas with some Nuln Oil. Being really careful when I'm around the orange. I really don't want to get any of this black shade over the orange areas because it's going to be really hard to tidy up. If you're enjoying the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. If you would like to support the channel and become a member, please press the join button down below. And after those shades have dried, you can see that they've all added definition all over the model, brought out all of the details and sunk into all of the recesses. So now it's time to start highlighting. The first highlight I'm going to apply is some Fire Dragon Bright. I'm going to apply this all over the power armour. So for this I'm going to apply it as an edge highlight all of the panels of the power armour, keeping these lines nice and thin. We're just applying them at the edge of every single panel all over the Space Marine. Much like the shade, this step will take a little while, but working together with that pin shade, it really creates some great contrast between light and shadow. It really makes all of that power armour pop. So just take your time, work your way around the model and apply a really thin edge highlight of Fire Dragon Bright on all the raised parts, on the edges of all of the panels of the power armour. Some of these sharper points here, I'm using the side of my brush to get a nice solid line on the raised edges. On other parts, I'm just using the very tip of my brush, keeping the pressure exactly the same as I work my way around to get a nice smooth, even line as an edge highlight on all of these panels. for a random colour combination, I'm really liking what's come out on this Space Marine. I think the colours actually work really well together. I don't know if I've just lucked out and managed to randomly get colours that work in colour theory, or whether some people focus a little bit too much on planning their colours, and as long as they're painted well in nice smooth layers, any combination works for a Space Marine. Maybe we'll have to keep testing this out again, see if I can come up with some other colour combinations, see if I can get one that really doesn't work. Maybe that's for a later video. Let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to see that, or if there's any other models you'd like to see me paint using a random colour generator. And after that Fire Dragon Bite's been applied, you can see it's worked really well with that shade, added that definition all over the model. It's really made that power armour pop. So the next I'm going to paint is the eyes. So for that I'm going back to the random colour wheel to decide what colour the eye lenses are going to be. So let's give this one final spin. See what colour eyes this Space Marine's going to have. He's going to have dark blue eye lenses. He's actually going to look really good popping out from that orange power armour. So I'm coming in with some Cantor blue. I'm going to very carefully sink this into the recesses of his eye sockets. I only want to get this into those eye lenses, really don't want to get any of this over the orange power armour I've already painted and highlighted. I'm just going to sink a little bit of Cantor blue into those eye lenses. That Cantor blue in there, you can see it's really giving him those dark eyes peering out from the helmet. So now I'm going to highlight these with a little bit of Altdorf Guard blue. Just going to apply a really thin line at the bottom of those eye lenses, but leaving the darker Cantor blue showing at the top. Let's just catch the very bottom with a line of Altdorf Guard blue. Brightened up the eyes a little bit. There's just one final step to really make these eye lenses pop. That's going to be to apply a little bit of white scar, just as a very small spot at the very back of the eye lenses. Just look like a reflection point for the light. So just apply a small spot, very back corner of the eye lenses of white scar. And with that white scar applied, that is the eyes painted on the model. So the next thing I'm going to highlight is the Aquila. For this I'm using Genestealer Purple. I'm just going to apply this as an edge highlight to all of the raised parts of the Aquila. So I'm going to carefully pick out all the feathers, all of the raised details, just catching these with a really thin edge highlight of Genestealer Purple. I'm also going to catch the outer edge of the shoulder pad trim as well, just catching this the side of my brush to highlight it with a little bit of Genestealer Purple. And finally, I'm going to apply a very thin edge highlight around the inside of the knee pad we painted indigo as well. This purple will work really well with that colour and give it a nice highlight, still making it read closer to indigo than a pure purple. And with those details highlighted, brightened up the model, added some interest to those areas. So the next thing I'm going to highlight is the undersuit. So for this I'm using Ogryn Camo, which is a really yellowy green paint. So that true honeydew colour that we drew from the random colour wheel. For this I'm just picking out all of the raised bits of the ribbing to the undersuit. I'm just catching these with a really thin highlight on the top of Ogryn Camo. And with that undersuit, highlight, you see it's brought the colour back up and brightened that undersuit back up. So I'm going to highlight the belts and the straps. For this I'll use some War Flesh. Still a nice dark green colour. I'm just going to apply as an edge highlight to the top and the bottom of the belt. As well as catching any raised parts to the strapping as well. Just catching these with some wire flesh as an edge highlight. With those belts and straps highlighted, the model's really starting to come together now. Next thing I'm going to highlight are those red pouches on his waist. For these I'm going to do a two-stage highlight. So I'm coming in with Evil Sun Scarlet first. I'm going to apply this as a chunky edge highlight around the edges of all these pouches. So this line can be slightly thicker. Then for an edge highlight, nice and chunky, this will allow us to come back in after and apply another colour within this highlight. Just apply a chunky edge highlight to all the pouches hanging from his waist. That chunky highlight applied, so we've got a nice line to put another colour within. And for that edge highlight, I'm going to use Wild Rider Red. I'm going to keep this really thin now and just apply this at the very edges of all the details on the pouch, just catching these with a really thin edge highlight of Wild Rider Red. This will work really well with that Evil Sun Scarlet, give us a nice transition to the brighter edge highlight and really add some interest to these otherwise quite flat details on the model. Those pouches highlighted, there's only a couple of details left to go now. The next thing I'm going to highlight is going to be the casing to his gun. For this I'm using Flash Gits Yellow. This is a really bright yellow. I'm going to apply this as an edge highlight on all the panels to the casing to the bolt gun. So obviously I'm going to be really careful, add all the other details, just going to catch the edges, all of the casings with a really thin edge highlight of Flash Gits Yellow. Just take your time at this stage, keep these really nice and small, just pick out every one of these panels and every detail with a really thin edge highlight of Flash Gits Yellow. That Flash Gits Yellow applied, that is the casing to the bolt gun highlighted, so that's just one final highlight left to apply to this model, and that's going to be some Stormhost Silver, which I'm going to use to edge highlight all of the metallics. So I'm just catching the very sharpest edges of any metallic details with a really thin edge highlight of Stormhost Silver. Make it look like the light's catching on all of these surfaces, give the impression of some shiny metal. So just take your time, work your way around and just pick out the very edges of any metallic details with a thin edge highlight of Stormhost Silver. And with that Stormhost Silver applied, that is the final highlight applied to this Space Marine. So what do you think? Do you think the random colour generator worked? Do you think it's an interesting experiment? Let me know in the comments down below if there's any other models you would like to see me paint using a random colour generator. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And happy painting!